Hi guys, I'm back for chapter 6. So much has happened in terrible Typhoid Mary. So we have found Mary. Mr. Soper has tried to tell her, hey, you could be a healthy carrier. You won't, be sick yourself, but you could still be making other people sick. And he, maybe not in the best way. We don't know exactly how he asked it based on history. But he said, hey, can I have a sample? And she said, excuse me, a what? And kind of freaked out on him and may or may not have chased him with a carving fork. Like one of those big ones that you hold a turkey with and cut. Yeah, big one. So, not a good situation. We are going into chapter 6. It is called In Which Mary Walks More Like a Man Than a Woman. We'll see. George Soper fled. He raced outside through the basement door, ran through the tall iron gate at the front of the property, and didn't stop until he hit Park Avenue. When he recounted the incident, Soper didn't say whether Mary chased him with the carving fork, or if she did, how far he ran. But he did say, I felt rather lucky to escape. Soper was not a large man. 1 year younger than Mary, he was of average height and a slender build. Bitterly, he explained that Mary was a large and very strong woman. She was 5 feet 6 inches tall, he said. Mary had a good figure and might have been called athletic had she not been a little too heavy. She prided herself on her strength and endurance. He went on to say that Mary was at the height of her physical and mental faculties, and that she had used rough language. Her behavior shocked Soper. It also hardened his attitude towards her. In his world view, no true or proper woman would act the way that she did. Many people from the middle and upper classes would have agreed with him. The dominant social view at this time held that a proper woman should be pious, pure, domestic, and submissive. Mary did not fit this ideal. She was strong and tough. She had a temper, she swore, and she threatened him. Soper concluded that Mary Mallon was more like a man than a woman. Nothing was so distinctive about Mary as her walk, unless it was her mind. He said, the two, her walk and her mind, shared a particular communion. Those who knew her best said Mary not only walked more like a man than a woman, but also that her mind had a distinctly masculine character. It's true that Mary was a strong woman. She wasn't submissive. She was stalwart and brave and not afraid to stand up for herself, even if it meant a fight. She had crossed the Atlantic Ocean alone as a young teenager. When her aunt and uncle died, she fended for herself in a large foreign city. She had probably done lots of hard domestic jobs as she worked her way up to the station of cook. In 1907, society had strict ideas about womanhood and marriage, too, based on something called the middle class ideal. This ideal said that a proper woman should be married and have children, that she should be a good mother and the foundation of the home, that she should not work outside the home, that she should tend to the needs of her husband and children, that the welfare of society and even the fate of a nation depended on her. A woman like Mary did not fit this ideal. Like most Irish immigrant women living in New York City at the time, she wasn't married. Neither were more than 50% of women her age who were living in Ireland. Young girls and unmarried women were encouraged to immigrate. As a cook, Mary earned more than other domestics, but she would never earn enough to become a middle-class woman. Mary needed her job. She needed her wages. She wasn't going to let George Soper harass her at her place of work or interfere with her livelihood. George Soper didn't consider these things, or if he did, he dismissed them. To him, Mary was unreasonable. As an engineer, he liked to solve problems. Once he presented the facts of the case, he expected Mary to understand the problem and to agree with him. I expected to find a person who would be as desirous as I was for an answer, he wrote later. Mary's reaction baffled him. I supposed that she would be glad to know the truth, he wrote. I thought I could count on her cooperation in clearing up some of the mystery which surrounded her past. I hoped that I might work out together the complete history of the case and make suitable plans for the protection of her associates in the future. He wanted to save her from her carrier state. He wanted to teach her the proper hygiene methods in order to protect the families for whom she worked, but he expected her to be grateful for his help. The sharp tines of Mary's carving fork said otherwise. I never felt more hopeless, said Soper after he left empty-handed. Soper may have felt helpless, but he wasn't giving up. He felt certain that he had gathered enough epidemiological evidence to prove that Mary was spreading the killer disease. At this point, however, the evidence that Mary Mallon caused typhoid wherever she worked was circumstantial. The fact that she happened to work at places where typhoid fever broke out did not prove that she caused the outbreaks. The outbreaks may have been a coincidence. The fact that Mary escaped the illness herself wasn't proof either. Nor was the fact that she left her employment soon after typhoid broke out. But these facts and her behavior convinced Soper that Mary Mallon was a menace to the public health. The circumstantial nature of the evidence did not deter him. As a matter of fact, I do not need the specimens in order to prove that Mary was a focus of typhoid germs, he said. My epidemiological evidence had proved that. Soper was wrong. He did need the specimens. As scientists and statisticians know, correlation does not imply causation. So far, he had only established a pattern that put Mary at the scene of the outbreaks. He needed the specimens to prove that Mary had caused the outbreaks. But he did not have the authority to force Mary to comply. No sanitary engineer did. Only the powerful New York City Board of Health had that authority. That raises the question. If Soper was certain that he had epidemiological evidence, why didn't he report Mary to the authorities right away? Perhaps in order to convince the health officials that something needed to be done, he needed direct evidence, the specimens, that linked Mary to the typhoid cases. Or perhaps he didn't want to share the credit for discovering the first healthy carrier in the United States. Whatever his reason, Soper doesn't say. He decided to act on his own. If he could persuade Mary in the Bowen's kitchen, perhaps she'd be more willing to listen someplace else. Once more, George Soper worked like a detective. I found that Mary was in the habit of going, when her work for the day was finished, to a rooming house on 3rd Avenue below 33rd Street, he recounted. He doesn't state how he found this out. It is likely that as she left the kitchen of the Park Avenue house, he followed her for 39 blocks all the way to the rooming house. Perhaps he stood beneath the elevated train tracks that rose above 3rd Avenue and watched as she let herself inside. This raised his suspicions about Mary. Soper snooped around the neighborhood asking questions. He learned that an out-of-work policeman known as August Breihof lived on the top floor and that Mary often visited Breihof, bringing him dinner, most likely leftovers from the Park Avenue kitchen. Soper didn't approve of Mary's visits. She was spending the evenings with a disreputable-looking man who had a room on the top floor, Soper wrote. His headquarters during the day was a saloon on the corner. While Mary was at work, Soper befriended Breihof. Perhaps he bought Mary's friend a drink or two at the saloon. Perhaps he waited until Breihof had too much to drink. However it happened, Soper convinced Mary's friend to show him the room where he lived. Soper followed Breihof to the top floor of the rooming house, where Breihof opened the door to his room. Soper was disgusted by what he saw. "I should not care to see another like it," he wrote. "It was a place of dirt and disorder." We don't know much about August Breihof. New York City directories for the years 1903 to 1908 list his occupation as policeman from census records. It seems that he was born in Manhattan in 1856, making him 51 years old when Soper met him. From Soper, we learn that Breihof was out of work, lived in a rundown flat, and spent too much time drinking. His only friends in the world were Mary Mallon and a large motley dog. From Soper, we also learn that August Breihof had a heart condition. Recent historians speculate that Mary must have loved Breihof despite his faults. She brought him supper. She was fond of his dog. She overlooked the fact that he spent his days in a saloon and drank too much and didn't work. Some claim that Mary lived with Breihof, although Soper states only that she spent her evenings with him. Others suggest that Mary may have paid his rent and given him drinking money. From Soper's accounts, we know that Mary's friendship with Breihof and her fondness for his big dog disgusted Soper. Soper doesn't speculate on how Mary Mallon could have cooked for Breihof yet. Not made him sick. It's possible that Breihof had recovered from typhoid at some point in his life and was naturally immune, just as Mary's former employer, J. Coleman Drayton, was. Soper convinced Breihof to allow him to wait for Mary after work. We don't know what Soper said or did to convince Breihof. Perhaps Breihof was drunk. Perhaps Soper slipped him a few dollars. Perhaps he wasn't forthright about his intentions. However it happened, the two men set a meeting time and Soper left. This time, Soper vowed to do better. He would be more patient with Mary. He would choose better words and speak more carefully. He could use as much tact and good judgment as he could muster. He would plan out what he'd say and rehearse the words. "I wanted to make sure she understood what I meant," said Soper, "and that I meant her no harm." But he wouldn't face Mary Mallon alone. He would bring an associate. Wow. Okay, so that was chapter 6. It now appears as though Soper has followed Mary from her place of employment to her friend's house, which is this August Breihof guy, and that he made friends with Breihof one day while they, I guess, were hanging out at the saloon. And he convinced him to let them kind of confront her together, but it doesn't sound like he told Breihof what he needed to talk to Mary about. So I have a feeling that Mary's probably not going to be happy to see him for a second time. Like, even a little bit. Like, not even a small amount. Will she, I think, be receptive to talking to him because of the way he has been deceitful and trying to get in contact with her again. That's just my personal opinion. I don't know what's going to happen next. I have not read chapter 7. We're finding out the information together because I have not read this novel before. So yeah, I think that it's going to get interesting, and I'm curious to see where it goes from here. See y'all later. Bye.